The mic is not picking you up. It's on.
Can you hear me now?
No, that's worse.
Gotta get right up to the mic.
This is a really bad start.
There you go. Yeah, no, it's not. No, it's not.
Just don't back away.
Okay. Hi, I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ who struggle with alcohol, drug addiction, and more character defects than I can list, and all associated garbage that comes with it. My name is Bruce. Before I came to Celebrate Recovery, I was drinking every day, morning, noon, and night, to the point of blacking out. Didn't really care about anyone or anything. Really didn't. Didn't start out that way. I discovered beer when I was 12, stealing from my parents every chance I got. Whiskey was available from my dad's bottle that was ever present. I don't think you ever noticed that it was constantly getting watered down by me. I would save it up and drink with my sister Judy and best friend Tom on our long bike ride to school in the early mornings, or sneak out of the house in the middle of the night. This quickly turned into using drugs of all kinds. People have done them all. I've done everything but intravenous drugs. So I used to smoke a lot of weed. I got acid, which was easy to buy at school, and of course, pills. I came from a long line of alcoholics, including both of my parents and most of my siblings, all older than me. I learned early about working hard and playing hard. Work first, play later. We had a farm and only boarded horses, ours and other people's. Guess what I got to show a lot of. We all worked very hard from an early age during chores and doing chores and small jobs to help with family finances. My first job was selling sweet corn on the roadside with my sisters in late summer. We did the work and our parents used the money to buy us kids clothes and supplies for the whole school year. I was very young. I was probably about 8 or 9. My sister was about the same, so that was a lot of work. I had a lot of freedom to do what I wanted because my parents both worked full time to make ends meet financially. That left me to be raised by my sister during the day and my parents at night. Growing up in the late 60s, early 70s, my siblings were pretty much hippies. They partied a lot, and just like me, they had a lot of freedom to do what they wanted, so it didn't end well for any of us. With little parenting from our folks, my brothers taught me how to blow things up, shoot guns, cuss, and lots of other things. I probably learned more cuss words from my parents, though, because they would come home from work and have terrible arguments and then proceed to get drunk. This went on and on for years, really my entire childhood. Besides the fact that they fought a lot, they seemed to love us kids, or at least us two younger ones. My older brothers told me later in life that they were beaten often while growing up. As a result, both hated my father very much. My father was not violent with me. He seemed to be a better dad by the time I came around. I don't know. My dad retired from Anchorage about 1970. He had made good money and had accumulated some comfort toys by then. He was part owner of two Cessna planes, a brand new motorhome, and then was hired as a credit union president. My 3 older siblings had moved out by then, so my parents decided we could afford to travel, and travel we did. We flew all over the U.S., San Diego, Northern California, Yosemite, Mount Rushmore, and that was just one trip. I went on many trips all over the United States. My dad actually let me fly the plane since I was 8. I really had a blessed childhood. So what happened to me? Then what the heck happened to me? I don't know. I think I became an alcoholic the first time I drank. I loved the way that it made me feel. I was shy and very insecure, didn't like myself, very low self-esteem. But alcohol changed all that, or so I thought. When I drank, I came out of my shell. People seemed to like me. I was funny. More importantly, I could talk to the girls. Most of my friends were partiers from the small country school I attended. Back then, almost everybody drank and smoked weed on a regular basis. I never really saw anything wrong with it. Everyone was doing it. I had no idea what kind of habit this would later wreak in my life. I graduated from high school in Mattawa in 1979, barely, and went into business with my dad as a bricklayer and a roofer. We worked together for about 10 years before we split, and I got a job in heating and air conditioning. But my job record was really terrible. I bounced from job to job, and my love life was very much the same. I was attracted to, partiers, alcoholics, drug addicts, and stuff. But again, I didn't see anything wrong with it. I started doing lots of cocaine, then learned how to freebase, which, if you're younger, you probably don't remember. It was homemade crack, basically. Then I started with crank, or meth as it is called today. The only constant in my life was drugs and alcohol. My entire life revolved around these two things. And through all this, God was never a part of my life or my family's life, or so I thought. The first time I got arrested for drunk driving, I was in my 30s. I blew a .28 blood alcohol, almost 3 times the legal limit. They threw me in a jail cell with a girl named Craig, and that was a pretty interesting night for this old country boy. It was the first time I'd ever been around that kind of thing, and so anyways, this incident was the first time I got pulled over, because in those days, as long as you could still touch your nose and you didn't puke down the front of the officer's uniform, you're good to go. I didn't really learn anything from the slap on the wrist. I got a restricted license for 60 days, and I was right back at it. Fast forward a few years, fast forward 8 years to my second offense. The laws had changed, and because I had a prior high blood alcohol content, they threw me under the bus, and rightfully so. I was a danger of offense. I haven't driven a vehicle ever since that day, 15 years ago. And just to give you a little bit of stats, that's 180 months I haven't driven a vehicle. That's 5,400 plus days. I won't even tell you how many hours. It's pretty crazy. But the next time you take your car to a shop to get it worked on and complain about it overnight, just think about those facts and figures. But I don't blame anybody. I did it, and I got punished, so I'm fine with that. You might think that after all that it would be lesson learned, but you would be wrong. It would take a twist of fate that began 6 years ago when I quit my marriage, the 3 jobs I was working, and I got evicted for the first time. I had no choice but to move in with my sister in a small town called Paw Paw. I lived there about 1 year before my sister had had enough. Then I moved into a house in the middle of town with 3 other hardcore alcoholics. Just my kind of people, right? After living there for just over 2 years, my roommates all moved out around the same time, leaving me with the house, lease, and the bills. I had no choice but to find new roommates, which I did. But unknown to me, both were meth addicts. That didn't end well. It didn't take too long for wheels to fall off the wagon again. I fell way behind on rent, and all the utilities were shut off. It was November of 2017, not that long ago, really. It's very near my heart. It's like it happened yesterday, but anyways. And so November of 2017, and I knew I was in the tall grass this time. I remember sitting in my bedroom for days, then weeks, watching my breath because it was so cold inside. I was literally starving and freezing, but my drinking didn't stop. It got much worse. My hands were shaking so bad that I had to hold my beer can with both hands in the morning just to take a drink and ward off the DTs. All my money was gone, so I borrowed every penny I could get my hands on just to feed my addiction. I was truly sick, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. I remember sitting on my bed, where I rarely moved from, staring at a piece of hard candy on my nightstand for 3 days before I actually ate it. It was the only thing I ate in several days. I said I was pretty bad. It was so bad that I started having visual and auditory hallucinations. First for me, even though I've been drinking for 40 years, it was horrible. I thought, I'm truly losing it. I'm losing it. That's when I had reached the proverbial bottom of the barrel. I wasn't just at the bottom of the barrel, I was trying to eat my way through the bottom of the barrel. I was one messed up puppy. So, facing homelessness, nearing starvation, and with little hope of recovering from my 40 years of alcoholism, I truly didn't know what to do, or who to talk to, or where to turn. But decided it was time to try something different. I had been to the Freshwater Community Church a few times and heard about a program, Coffee and Bagels, where I might apply for help. While waiting to talk with a caseworker, a young lady approached me and asked me how I was going. I proceeded to tell her everything I was going through. Without hesitation, she told me of her own drug and alcohol history and that she was nearly 15 years clean and sober. I was absolutely stunned. She didn't look like an alcoholic that I did. I met privately with Allison, Director of United Christian Services, who began to explain to me about the love of Jesus Christ. She asked me if I had a Bible, which I did not. She left and returned a short time later with not only a Bible, but Pastor Troget's in tow. Together they went into greater detail about the reckless love of God, and that all things are possible through Christ. They were right. They asked me if I had heard of Celebrate Recovery. At that time, I had no idea what they were talking about. I had never heard of Sierra. But I decided to try a meeting. Now I have been to hundreds of AA meetings over the last 20 plus years with some success, even managed to stay sober for a couple of years. But, I was what they call a dry drunk. I never worked the steps. I never had a sponsor. And it would keep me sober for a couple of years. But, it just didn't stick. So, with what I know now, it's no surprise that sobriety didn't last. The first CR meeting would change my life drastically. As soon as I walked the door, I was greeted by the same woman I had talked to at Coffee and Bagels. She greeted me with a smile and said she was happy I decided to check out the program. She remembered me, and that meant a lot to me. Once I started coming to CR, I just kept coming back. I didn't know what else to do. Before I knew it, I started attending Freshwater Church every Sunday, along with Celebrate Recovery meetings. Soon I started arriving early and started to volunteer setting up for the meetings. This was my first experience with service work, even though I didn't know it at that time. See, the Holy Spirit was working on my heart even before I really knew what that meant. Life is full of detours and times when we step off the good path. We have been lucky. With about 4 months of sobriety under my belt, I had a relapse lasting for 3 days. I was again facing the same thing with hopelessness, and I was just absolutely consumed by fear and hopelessness and helplessness. The issue with my sister soon passed. I knew this relapse was a temporary setback. I missed one CR meeting and came back the next week and kept coming back. But not before I fessed up to my sponsor. All those involved in CR, they were all gracious, kind, and supportive. All the things that Christ teaches us to be. Notice my hands aren't shaky.
Amen.
I did not look at this as a failure this time, but as a learning experience of what not to do. First off, I did not pray and ask God for His guidance and help. I did not call my sponsor. I didn't call any of my accountability partners. What I did do is be honest after the fall. I dusted myself off and always move forward. See, honesty, in my opinion, is the bedrock of all types of recovery. Without honesty, you really don't have much of a way to rely on. Perhaps I didn't realize it at the time, but my personal growth, honesty, and commitment to my recovery resulted in my being asked to join the CR leadership team. I felt blessed and jumped at the chance. It was truly one of the smartest things I have done in my life. It has taught me to step out of my selfishness, think of others before myself. It has also taught me to trust in the Lord and to surrender myself to Him, something I still work on a daily basis. Now that I have already attained all this, or have already arrived at my goal, but I press on to take hold of that for which Christ Jesus took hold of me. Philippians 3:12. By attending CR as well as other various recovery meetings, getting to church, listening to the sermons, I have come to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And folks, I was insane. Step 2, for it is God who works in you to will and to act according to His good purpose. Philippians 2:13. But I have made other rookie mistakes in my recovery, along with relapsing. I got into an intense personal relationship before the recommended 1 year clean time. Now that I'm approaching 2 years clean, it makes sense that my accountability partner, my sponsor, and others in CR leadership advised me against making that choice. But, I thought I knew best. Like I have a good record of making smart choices. At the time we broke up, by the grace of God, I was well enough to move on and not let it wreck my recovery. It could have easily turned into that. I could have went on months, years. We attended a CR meeting, me and Tim and Missy and Ginger last week, and Jamie had spoken about the number one cause of relapse is getting into a serious relationship and having falter. It's the number one cause for relapse. Is that so? My relapse. Well, the breakup could have easily turned into a long-term bender. See, I'm in a fight for my life here. I know I have another drunk in me, but I don't know if I have another recovery in me. That scares the crap out of me. There's a saying in AA, meetings will get you sober. Getting a sponsor and working the steps will keep you sober.
Amen.
Since I decided to turn my life and will over to the care of God, as I said before, my life has changed drastically. I now attend church regularly, serve at the church, have a rewarding job, wonderful friends I've met through church and the local recovery community. These friends are truly my family. You folks are my family. As another form of service work, last April I was blessed to go on a missions trip to the Dominican Republic. Through the grace of God and my friends in Christ, Ron and Melanie. Love you guys. I have a peace and serenity in my life I have not had since I was a child. I would like to thank the CR leadership team for all they have done for me and for continuing with me on this glorious journey of faith. I am always mindful of He who is God that is responsible for who I am today. I could never figure out what happened that directed my life path or why I had failed until after I started going to Celebrate Recovery. Recovery is a process of steady improvement. It starts with showing up with meetings, showing up for meetings, listening, learning, and putting into practice what you're being taught. It doesn't happen overnight, but if you keep coming back, your blessings will start to happen. Remember, God works on His schedule, not ours. Please don't give up before your miracle happens. I used to wonder since I thought I had such a great childhood and upbringing, how did all this happen? You hear so many testimonies where just terrible things happen to people when they're very young, and I never had any of that happen. So I really struggled with it, and I came to one conclusion. I have truly come to believe addiction in all its ugly forms is an equal opportunity destroyer. It cares not about our background, does not care if you're a man or a woman, the color of your skin, rich or poor. It just destroys. It is right that we should celebrate and be glad. For your brother was dead, and he is alive again, and was lost, and now is found. Luke 15:32. Thank you for the opportunity to share my life experiences on this journey of recovery.
Powered by the Almighty. Yay, Bruce!
Bruce powered by the Almighty. All right, I like that. So, yeah, think about some of the things. We can go ahead and have a seat for a minute here. Think about some of the things that he said, and you'll have an opportunity to talk about what spoke to you in his life story during the small groups. That'll kind of be the focus question. What in Bruce's story reached out to you? I want to talk about one or two of the things he said, because he said them. So tonight, we do have the small groups, right? Just through those double doors. The second room on the left is the men's small group, and at the four corners on the right is one of the women's small groups. The other one is upstairs. And is there anyone who's never been to a Celebrate Recovery before that is planning to stay for a second group? If you could meet with, Ann, she gave one of the announcements in the back, and she'll talk to you about that. So, but we are going to close with a serenity prayer, then we'll go to small group. We'll have signatures here, but if you're staying for small group, you can have your signatures at the end of that second meeting. That kind of speeds it up here. So we'll close with serenity prayer. We got 5 minutes, so let's keep the smoke break quick and get right to the meetings at 7:30. So let's stand for the serenity prayer.
One day.
God, grant me the serenity